Are you there? Would like to do a sound check? Dr. Moran?
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Oh, good, right?
Hello, thank you all for being here tonight. We will go ahead and begin the meeting at 6:15 p.m. And just a reminder to the board, when we speak, let's go ahead and just say who we are so the audience can hear, and then so it's captured properly in the minutes. So with that, Dr. Weeks, can we have the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, and can we please have roll call?
Good evening, Dr. Laura Diaz,
Present.
Ms. Carmen Trujillo, present, Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Here.
Mr. Reginald Carrillo,
Here.
Dr. Alicia Bink.
Here.
Thank you.
And can I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Alicia Bink, so moved.
And can I have a second?
Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
Is there any discussion? That the agenda is adopted, and we will move on to awards, recognitions, and announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the governing board. For those of you watching, you might notice that I'm sitting at a different spot, and that's because we have some training going on. I want to thank our folks. I want to thank Ms. St. Clair for the time that you spent with us. And Alondra, welcome to helping us out here, at least for the short time. So that's a celebration. And so I appreciate everybody's hard work on that. We also have a couple of announcements. The first is also a celebration, and that is we are working with the Wesley Center to develop a schedule to deliver testing and vaccine, and I believe some other things to the community. And once we get the MOU put together, we will bring it to the governing board for approval and finalize the schedule for the benefit of our communities. Mr. Quintana, do you have any additional details?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Dr. Weeks. So we had a meeting this afternoon with Wesley Health Center. If some of you are not familiar with the Wesley Center, they have six clinics across the Central and South Phoenix area that provide health services to the community, especially underserved communities, in the area. And there was a partnership that's been formed with Wesley Community Center by way of working with individuals and staff at Herrera School. So Ms. Shane Sotelo and Mr. Carlos Ardon and others like Lynette Wilgen have been working on a partnership with Wesley Community Center where they can provide a mobile clinic for our schools, eventually all our schools. And they provide health checks and minor medical checkups and so forth for the community, both for staff as well as students at each of the schools. So the idea is that they will schedule time with each of the schools on a particular day to go and visit a school, be there for a few hours to provide these services. And obviously we will communicate that with the public and with the students, before that, when those things take place. We're looking at starting off with 5 schools, Garfield, Herrera, Hurd, Lowell, and Edison. But eventually they feel they have the capacity to serve all our schools, on a rotating basis. The other great thing about this is that we asked them specifically if they're able to provide virus or COVID testing and the vaccine, and they say they can. But one little caveat they would like to know when we are doing vaccines, and especially the vaccines, that they would like to know, have a sense of how many people would want the vaccine in that particular time, so that they have the proper equipment and the proper dosages to provide them. So it's something we're very excited about. Some of the next steps that will be taking place. One is we'll provide the board a board update next week as to kind of where things are at and where things are going with this partnership. We do need to develop an MOU with Wesley Center. That's something we're working on now, and also working with our legal counsel to make sure that we have that ready for the board to review and approve at the next board meeting on August 12th. And other than that, we're excited about the partnership. Also want to recognize Ms. Shane Sotelo and Mr. Carlos Ardon and Donette and other folks that have been very involved with this process and got this thing going.
Mr. Quintana, I do just want to say how much I appreciate the work that has gone into that. It is actually at the bottom of my list of questions for tonight regarding whether we could have a mobile health unit. So that is amazing. I definitely want to know when we can get it to all of our schools for sure, though. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for that. And also one thing that, they would have to do as well is that not only do they want to serve our students and staff at our communities, but also they want to partner with us going forward so that they can serve also the community in general, within the schools. So that's something we're very excited about as well.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. That's exciting news.
It is.
My second report tonight revolves around a policy, or several policies, I should say, that we talked about earlier in the year, and that revolves around our student discipline policies. You may recall that we talked about Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Alishire pulling together a team to take a look at several policies connected to student discipline. I'm very proud to say that they've done tremendous work over the summer, and over the next few weeks, they will be wrapping up, getting it vetted by legal, and then we hope to be bringing the policy first read to you very soon. Of course, long before then, we will provide the board an update on what's coming, so you're not surprised. But at the end of the day, this is phenomenal work, and I want to thank the team that came together, you, Dr. Gonzalez, and Dr. Alishire, and everybody who put a tremendous amount of time and effort into laying what I call a cornerstone of equity in policy, which is student discipline. It speaks to how we treat and the pillar of how we treat our students. So I want to thank everybody for that. And with that, Dr. Diaz, that concludes my awards, recognitions, announcements, and my superintendent report.
Thank you, Dr. Weeks, and thank you, Mr. Quintana, for your update as well. We will go ahead and move on to community communications. How many do we have tonight? Just one? Yes.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Weeks, cabinet, fellow educators, and people of the Phoenix #1 community. My name is Jay Barbuto, and I am the proud president of the Phoenix Elementary Classroom Teachers Association. Our association would first like to express gratitude to the district for their ongoing efforts to assist our school communities in vaccinations. The only way we're truly going to get through this pandemic is through equitable distribution of the vaccine, and having these drives is one step towards a return to normalcy. Our association is asking our district to now have a back-to-school vaccine drive for both students, families, and staff. These can be on site during school hours and will allow families who weren't able to attend the vaccine drives this summer an opportunity to roll up their sleeves. PECTA is standing by willing to help facilitate this process because we know it can be a serious commitment of labor. Additionally, we'd like to thank Dr. Alishire and Ms. Elvis for leading the committee on improving our school discipline policy and including PECTA in this important work. We truly believe the final product will be a model statewide for inclusivity, equity, and intentionality when dealing with discipline. And we look forward to sharing the language crafted with our brothers and sisters of AEA statewide. As an association, we wished we could have expressed similar gratitude toward the Arizona State Legislature. However, with both their intentional gutting of Proposition 208 through SB 1783, SB 1827, and SB 1828, and their negligence in terms of public health in regards to removing the board's power to enforce mask mandates, we are left to clean up the mess. You have our word that parts are already moving to ensure that SB 1783 SB 1H27 and SB 1H28 will never see the light of day. And we look forward to our community allies assisting us with mobilization of that electoral process to ensure that every penny of Proposition 208 ends up where it's supposed to be, in our schools. As for the changes to the COVID-19 protocols, please understand that as a labor union, our first job is to still look after the safety of every student, staff member, and community allies. We know Governor Ducey has left us all in a tough spot, and we will work with the district, governing board, and especially our classified janitorial staff to ensure we are all being as safe as possible. Thank you for your time and be safe. And that concludes this evening's community comments.
Thank you. And as a reminder to our community, we cannot comment during this time, but it is something that we consider and can bring up in future agenda proposals. So with that, we'll move on to approval of consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Jessica Bueno, so moved.
And do I have a second?
Alicia being seconded.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. That the motion passes, and we will move on to item F1.
Thank you, President. Yes, the first item here is we want to request the approval of the adopted budget for this next school year starting in August, or actually, I'm sorry, the fiscal year starts on July 1st. But before I do that, though, I wanted to introduce you a gentleman that is our new Director of Finance and Budgeting. As you know, the current or the more recent Director of Finance and Budgeting, Ms. Janice Durham, transitioned over to federal programs, and we're very happy for her, her moving over there, and we think that she'll do a great job in that position. And as a result, we had to fill the position that we have now. And we're very happy to introduce Mr. Damon Norris, that became our new Director of Finance and Budgeting, and his first day was this past Monday. And we'd like to ask him to just introduce himself and his background a little bit.
Can you hear me? There we go. Good evening to you guys. It's a true pleasure and honor to be working for Phoenix One. I was truly amazed that I got the job and the position here, and you guys brought me on with such faith. I'm looking forward to serving the community here in Phoenix One. I think it's an absolutely awesome community. I've done my research and absolutely love the area. I've worked in this area before. Prior to coming on board here, I've worked in the charter school sector for the last 8 to 10 years. With big networks, little schools, building schools, and helping them run at the association level as well. Prior to that, I worked in finance for Fortune 500 companies for probably about 10 to 15 years again, and love to bring that knowledge to here, learn more about this community, about the schools, and help support your guys' mission to better the community with the schools. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Norris, and welcome to the Phoenix Elementary family. So that brings us to the adoption of the budget, and the timing is perfect here because Mr. Norris is going to be the key point of contact and the key administrator that's going to help us to manage the budget and going forward, along with reporting and comparing budget to actual and so forth. That's something that we're going to put in place and that he's going to be in charge of. And so with that, I wanted to request the approval to adopt the fiscal year 2021-22 budget as presented. As you recall, we presented the proposed budget at the last board meeting. Not this last week, but not yesterday, but the week before. And this particular budget is exactly the same. It did not, we did not make any changes. And so we're basically asking you to approve the basically the same budget as was proposed and now adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. You don't have anything else to present, correct?
Correct.
Can I please have a motion to approve the adopted budget as presented.
Alicia Vink, so moved.
And do I have a second?
Reggie Carrillo, I second.
And is there any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes, and we'll move on to F2.
Thank you, governing board members, for approving the adopted budget. Greatly appreciate that. This next item, we're going to be talking about our safety mitigation plan, and we're going to present this in a couple of different formats. One is we're going to cover with you the presentation. Okay, gotcha. Got it? All right. Thanks for your patience. As I was saying that we're going to present this in a couple of forms. One is we're going to take some of the key areas within a current plan that are key to everyone, we're looking at basically keeping the same as it is now. So there's no changes, but we want to cover them with you because we want to ensure you understand what we're doing and what's been successful over the last several months in keeping our families and students and the staff safe, in our school environment. We've had I believe quite a good success record of minimizing the exposure and the cases within our school system. And so I believe the safety mitigation plan has been the key, to making that happen. So with that, and then we're going to go over the next part we're going to cover 4 areas specifically that we want to change from the current plan to the new plan effective, especially with the start of the school year in August. So that'll be the second part. On the first front, I'm going to ask Ms. Linda Jeffries to cover the first few topics regarding the current activities.
Thank you. Good evening, President Diaz, members of the governing board, and Dr. Weeks. Yes, please.
I apologize. I forgot to mention that, as you know, we've been working with Healthy Verified to help us put this plan together and also review it on a frequent basis. So we do have also Dr. Moran and Mr. Eric Hill that are on Zoom that are also available to, for questions and things that you might have.
So good evening again. So as we have looked at our mitigation plan and looking to the beginning of the school year, schools have not yet received additional guidance from the CDC or the Maricopa County Department of Health. And so as we were having discussions with our committee, we turned to our partners at Healthy Verify, and you might remember that Healthy Verify is the organization who we partnered with, who helped us write our first mitigation plan. And so tonight, as we review our plan, we certainly want to thank Dr. Moran and Mr. Hill for their expert guidance and conversations with us as we look at making some modified changes to the current mitigation plan, keeping in mind that our focus, of course, is the health and safety of our students and our staff. And so I want to just review the key areas of interest for our current plan and areas that we right now are not recommending any additional changes to. So we are first going to look at our health checks and screenings. So at this current time, we are still going to ask our parents to conduct those health screenings at home prior to sending their children to school. You might recall in our current mitigation plan, we have a number of questions that we will continue to communicate with parents so that they can look at their children and assess their children's health before they send them to school. So we will certainly continue to express the importance to parents of making sure that they go through that checklist with their children prior to coming to school. We will no longer be taking temperature checks at the school. And then also our families, as I mentioned, our families will be asked to conduct the health screenings at home prior to sending their students. And then, of course, certainly if students are exhibiting any sort of illness symptoms, we are asking parents to remember to keep their children at home, even if it's the little sniffles. We certainly want to keep all of our other students and our staff healthy and safe while we reopen our schools to a much larger community. So in terms of providing meals on our campuses, we will continue offering breakfast in our classrooms. We will also be offering lunch in the classrooms. However, we wanted our schools to be able to have that flexibility. So for those schools that have the capacity within the cafeteria to be able to safely have lunch or have students come into the cafeteria for lunch, of course, following our mitigation strategies, making sure that there is ample distance between the kids. They will have that flexibility if their campuses are suited for that. In addition, we do have some schools, when the weather permits, of course, we know it's very hot outside, but as the weather starts to cool off, and for those schools who would like to have plans where their children can eat outside, we are offering that flexibility. Again, as long as we adhere to the mitigation plan and making sure that we keep socially distanced.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
Jessica Bueno. So do you have a projected number of schools that will allow lunch in their cafeteria?
You know, at this time, I don't have that information. You know, certainly a lot of this information is going to be new to principals. And so after tonight, we will be sharing this plan and any additional changes with principals and then ask them to create their plans moving forward. So that's certainly something that we can get back with the board on.
Also, Linda, if I can add to your question, if we base it on the interest that the schools had at the end of the year, there was about 4 or 5 schools that wanted to do feed the kids in the cafeteria. So if that holds true, then we'll probably have about 4 or 5 or so 6 that will continue that.
Thank you. So in terms of cohorting within our classrooms, we are going to ask our schools to continue to cohort students. We know that the virus is still very much active in Maricopa County. And so this is one of the ways that we can continue to contact trace should we have students or other members of our staff who might contract the COVID virus. So we are recommending that the cohorting and grouping protocols remain in place. We will be offering after-school programming. We know that after-school programming, such as peer and our extracurricular activities, are crucial to our parents and our families. And so we are recommending that we resume our after-school programs and extracurricular activities such as peer and other clubs and activities. For the after-school programming, though, we will not cohort because it is much more difficult to cohort in an after-school setting such as that. However, we will be emphasizing during that time to be sure that we are following the other mitigation strategies, such as keeping the social physical distancing, as well as hand washing, using hand sanitizer, and those types of things.
And if you don't mind,
Yes.
if we can maybe discuss a little bit further, because especially the after-school programming, the reason we decided to go this way is that we have there's been a lot of need expressed by families that they want to have the after-school programs, whether it's peer or so forth, and so we felt that it was important for us to be able to offer that service to our families, and so really the only way we could do that is without a cohorting, and because it's too difficult to have enough staff to be able to cohort and separate the groups into how they were following throughout the day. And we did discuss this with Healthy Verify and as well, because we had a concern about about not cohorting. And so in order to provide the service, we decided to go ahead and do this, but also take other measures as far as to make sure we have the proper distancing as best we can in the programs. And so those are things that we'll continue to enforce and require even though we're not cohorting within that. So if there's any questions about that, obviously we'll address them.
Jessica Bueno, I do have a question. So do all our after-school programs, they're pretty much ran in-house, or are we partnering with like third-party partners to provide that service?
So the biggest program that we have that's after school is the peer program. That is something that we do internally. So that it's our own staffing that we have, and programming that we're available, as well as the like sports programs. We also have our own programs and our own coaches that, that administer those programs. I'm not aware of there might be some other extracurricular activities that we use, other external sources for, but for the peer program and for the sports programming, it's all internal.
Thank you.
About how many students have we had in the peer program total in the past? Do we know?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but I do know percentages. We get information that basically about 60% of the students, kind of throughout the district, participate in the after-school programs.
How many? I'm sorry.
60%.
60%?
Yeah.
Okay. So if 60% of our students are in the after-school program and we're not cohorting, then how many students end up quarantining if there's one student from Miss A's class and the rest of the students are from all the other classes? How do we then manage that quarantine? And how are we contact tracing the classroom and the after-school program?
I'm sorry, what was the last question? How we contact
How
them?
are we contact tracing? Because now that child will have been in their classroom, plus the after school, plus the cafeteria.
Right. Yeah, again, that was one of the, biggest concerns we had about this, about doing this. And there's gonna be probably some different steps we have to follow depending on when the child or the person is gonna, feels that they've been exposed or they have the virus. And so that if, let's say they find out before the school starts the next day, then, obviously we're hoping that they stay home and don't expose, the rest of the kids and the school. But however, if they come to school and they realize that, they have some symptoms or maybe even the virus, then at that point, the class that they're in, that'll be quarantined, if they were exposed and they had the virus, then that particular class will be quarantined. And so it's something we do have to manage the contact tracing, better and quicker than in the past. But we do feel that if we stick to the cohorting during the day, that we'll be able to quarantine just that one classroom instead of multiple classrooms.
So, but if that student was in the after school program, and then if Healthy Verify could chime in, just remind me if students not exhibiting symptoms yet are contagious before they have active symptoms.
I'll take that question. So there are multiple questions here. So I'll start from the beginning. So the first question is how do you handle quarantining once you find a case in an after school program? And I don't know the specifics of your after school program, but there are techniques to ameliorate the impact of potential cases. In the absence of perfect cohorting, what you can do is assigned seating. So the definition of close contact, as you probably know, is a cumulative 15 minutes exposure to a case within 6 feet. And this is cumulative 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. So if it's a math class that lasts 40 minutes or 45 minutes, then everyone, if there's a case in that math class, everyone who has been within 6 feet of the case will have to be quarantined. And so assigned seating actually is a great antidote to imperfect cohorting. Again, this is something that I would encourage the schools to adopt, particularly when cohorting is not perfect, both at the class cohort and at the after school activities that are not cohorted. Distance is another potential antidote or a mechanism to ameliorate the number of exposed students. And even though you're keeping 3 feet distance, and unless the CDC changes those when they publish their school updates tomorrow, we're assuming 6 feet. If you have assigned seating, you're only going to quarantine those students that were within 6 feet of that particular case. So you would not have to quarantine the whole aftercare classroom and the whole day classroom if you do assigned seating as much as possible. And of course, that's age related. And then there was another question about if children are contagious when they are asymptomatic, and the answer is yes. So the period of contagiousness or infectivity runs from 48 to 72 hours prior to the start of symptoms. So yes, if the student doesn't have any symptoms, to do your contact tracing, you go back 48 hours and you see who the student has been in contact with during that period of time.
Thank you. So it was my understanding that we are looking at 3 feet distancing though, and we are going to strongly encourage masks, but we cannot mandate them anymore. So how does that change the number of students we would then need to quarantine?
The wearing masks or not doesn't change the number of students, because the close contact definition does not take into consideration the wearing of masks. So even if everyone is required to wear masks and everyone is wearing masks, those within the 6 feet distance, masks or not, are considered close contact. So it doesn't change the number of students that would be quarantined. And that's why I'm emphasizing, please strongly consider assigned seating every single period of class, so that if you have an exposure in multiple classes, you don't have to quarantine everyone. You just quarantine those who are physically within the 6 feet limits.
Would that be the cafeteria too then?
Correct. So every space that you can actually assign seat is best. So for cafeteria, sometimes it's difficult to keep a space of 3 feet or even 6 feet. So again, there are multiple ways how you can ameliorate risk. So the cafeteria situation, for example, one thing that I can think is keep everyone at 6 feet while they're eating, because by definition, they won't be wearing masks. If you cannot keep them at 6 feet, keep them at 3 feet, but then always have the same group of children share one table. And I know it's cumbersome, but again, if your main goal is to ameliorate the impact or decrease or minimize the number of kids you're sending to quarantine, then you have to do all those things. And that's while the transmission in the community is like it is right now in Maricopa, which is 45 to 55 per 100,000. So we're going, for the last 4 weeks, we've been going between moderate to substantial level of transmission. And also while the uptake of vaccination actually increases as well, which I doubt it's going to be significant before the fall, before the start of the school. So I envision the fall not being completely back to normal. Some mitigation strategies will have to be kept to minimize the impact of finding cases among your students.
Thank you. Mr. Quintana, so I guess then the question is, and maybe for an update later, do we have the capacity to manage all of that with 90% of our students back on campus? Because last year we were doing it with less students. So yeah, do our teachers, does our staff, do our principals have the capacity to track and seat and assign, and our peer staff too, right? Our peer staff I've walked into a peer room a few times, and it's not typically an assigned seating situation. So because it's staffed less than our classrooms usually. So I'm not sure if we've added staff for this situation.
Right. So yeah, these are things that we have to, go back and reemphasize. We have been working with a group that's, basically we call the safety mitigation team that's made up of safety managers, each of the schools, and also the principals, and also some other folks that are part of the kind of the main committee. And so these things we're discussing today have been discussed with the, with that group. And we'll continue more discussion after we kind of go through some of the changes that we want to make and, whatever is approved or not approved. And so as far as implementing this, that'll be the next step is how do we implement this? And how do we make sure that people are following these guidelines as far as, the assigned seating, the proper distancing, and also, you mentioned about the capacity, because that is something that we have to look at to see if we do have 90% plus of the kids returning. We don't necessarily have a lack of a classroom capacity. That is, we have plenty of capacity for space wise, but we do have to make sure that we can manage the human capital and the teachers that are able to support, the additional space and classes that we need. So that's something that we have to work in the implementation plan of this plan.
Do we have time to add that staff? I'm a little concerned about our timeline at this point. Before school starts.
Yeah, what we're planning to, as part of the ESSER funding, we had basically allotted extra instructional assistants that at the time it wasn't necessarily for this particular purpose, but I think in this case, if things don't change drastically with the overall epidemic, then we might have to use some additional staff for this purpose, and in fact, we might possibly have to get more, but again, that's the hiring piece, is a little difficult, this time of year, obviously, but we do have allotted right now some extra instructional assistance as part of our current separate ESSER plan.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, I'm sorry, I know there's. Are we waiting until the students show up to see how many students show up before we figure out if we need additional staff, or how is that going?
No, we can estimate the numbers based on the enrollment from the last day of school.
Okay.
And so based on those numbers, we can get a sense of how many we think are going to return. We do have some numbers for the iAcademy. And so we can go with the assumption that the rest, will come back to us, at 100%. And if we go based on those estimates, then we can estimate how many more we're going to need, prior to school starting. And obviously, we'll adjust as we start school. But the closer we get to the school starting, based on registrations of the families coming into it, we'll know a more accurate number. But we can estimate now based on the last day of enrollment.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Moran, Reggie Carrillo, I have a question, and maybe Mr. Quintana can answer too. So does Healthy Verify, and specifically this safety and mitigation plan, take into account strategies and protocols that focus on the possible impacts of other infectious diseases? And I'm asking because I'm specifically thinking about the flu, and I'm thinking about now that our students are coming back and we cannot mandate masks on our campuses, that one thing that will be returning back to normal is the flu, the presence of the flu and case increases.
Yes, and it won't be just the flu. It will also be RSV, para-influenza, other coronaviruses. Can you hear me?
There's background.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I think I don't know, there's someone else.
Yeah. There's background noise. I'm in the hospital.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Night. Yeah. So I was saying, it's not just going to be the flu. It's going to be all other respiratory viruses as well, including RSV, coronaviruses, para-influenza, etc. So what has worked very well last flu season were masks. The fact that kids were not in person in school also helps, right? Because it's less exposure. Hand washing or sanitizing. If masks are optional, we still have great mitigation measures. For flu specifically, that's your question, is encourage everyone to get the vaccine. Very, very effective in terms of decreasing the number of hospitalizations, not necessarily decreasing the number of infections. It's not as good as the COVID vaccines. Encourage children to stay home or families to keep the children home if they are symptomatic, as it has been mentioned earlier. And constant hand sanitizing or hand washing in the students. There is no way around that. Now that children are coming full capacity in person to school, there will be infections. So I think it's important to emphasize that it should be an expectation that there will be infections in the fall. And also it should be, I encourage the schools to educate parents in the importance of vaccinating all those eligible for the COVID vaccine, vaccinating them, because even if it's very clear that when the rate of vaccination goes up in the community, the number of cases among children, even if they're not vaccinated, actually goes down. Of course, the transmission in the school goes down. And same happens for flu. Everyone pretty much 6 months or older is eligible for flu vaccine. So that's another thing that you can do this fall and winter to minimize the impact of the coming back of the respiratory virus.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that our plan does account for other respiratory diseases. And thank you for the reminder to parents and just all staff and individuals susceptible to respiratory diseases to go get your other vaccines too, not just COVID. So thank you, Dr. Moran.
My pleasure.
I just had one more question in line with Mr. Grillo. So knowing that there will be infections and that we're coming into fall and then we'll be contending with other viruses as well, also knowing that we have a new variant, why is now the right time to reduce our mitigation measures?
Are you asking me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I don't know why you ask if it's the right time. The right time depends on the locality. It depends on transmission, rate of transmission. And in the perfect world, it would be less than 20 per 100,000. And like I said, across Maricopa County is 45 to 55 constantly for the last 4 weeks. The second parameter to relax or start relaxing mitigation measures has to do with vaccination uptake among staff, teachers, all adults related to or who work in school, among families also, and among eligible children. I don't think, and clearly it has been very clear. We met yesterday with Mr. Quintana and 3 other members of his team. And it was very clear, we left it very clear from Healthy Verified perspective that unfortunately, masks have been taken away, a requirement of masks has been taken away from schools. Hence, we have to emphasize the other mitigation measures. So if anything, we're actually asking your schools to not get rid of the mitigation measures, actually to ramp them up, because now we have one less to work with, which is the masks. So if I'm sorry if it wasn't clear from our standpoint, but we're actually encouraging your schools to keep the other mitigation measures that are not masks, because now masks are going to be optional. And I don't know if you have, perhaps you can answer this question. What is the % of families or parents who will actually send their kids with masks to school? Do you know?
Yeah, right now we don't have a sense, what that would be.
Yeah. So if it's 80%, then obviously the impact will be lesser. If it's 20%, you will have many more unmasked children. And so as we discussed yesterday with Mr. Quintana, Healthy Verify is actually strongly recommending that we do not strip away all their mitigation measures now because we can't impose masks.
And also, thank you, Dr. Moran. And also just to add to that answer is when we first initiated the plan, it was, we made it very, fairly strict, from the sense that if we had individuals wear masks, we had individuals separating, at first it was 6 feet. That was a requirement by the CDC. And we also had partitions, there's partitions in the classrooms. And so even though we didn't have to do all those things, because as long as students were separated by 6 feet, they didn't have to wear masks. We didn't have to have partitions. So we added these extra steps into the process that we felt will provide better security and safety for the students, especially in families there. And so right now we feel that we can ease up a little bit of that on that, mostly because right now we can't require the wearing a mask, but we're gonna try to encourage it, as best we can, so that hopefully the majority of the students and will continue to wear them, even though we're not requiring them. So that's still the goal, that we wanna have a pretty high percentage of students and kids that wear the mask. And so that's, I mean, we're not gonna kind of let that go and just go with the current law. But so we're hoping that, we'll get a sense obviously the first day of school, but we're hoping that the majority of the kids will continue wearing masks, and that's something we're gonna emphasize in different different ways. So
Can I, sorry to interject, but I just want to add something else. So for those adults who work in the school premises, those adults who work in school premises who are not vaccinated should be wearing a mask too. Remember, the data is very clear. Within the school premises, transmission from adults to children is significantly more frequent than from children to adults. So those adults who are not vaccinated, who work at the school, please encourage them to wear a mask. I know you cannot force it or require it, but encourage them to wear a mask, so we keep other adults and children safe as well.
So I'm hearing Dr. Moran say, keep the mitigation measures, beef them up, be as careful as possible, especially because we're adding children and we do not have this mask mandate, even though we are very hopeful that our community will continue to mask because they know how important it is to keep everybody safe. So that's what I want to see reflected in the plan, that we are just going to mitigate as much as possible until our students can be vaccinated.
And also, once again, let me emphasize, this is super, super important. Encourage your families to get vaccinated. There is beautiful data from the UK, from Israel, that shows that even when children 16 or younger are not vaccinated, just the mere fact that the adults are getting vaccinated actually produced a significant decrease in the number of cases among children. And UK opened up their schools, and among 25,000 schools, they only had 100 outbreaks. And it's 100 outbreaks sounds like a lot, but let me tell you, each outbreak was 2 or more students or 2 or more individuals. And I say only because considering 25,000 schools across the UK, they only had 100 clusters of transmission, even though there was no significant mask wearing, but that is because more than 60% of the adult population has received at least 1 dose. So again, vaccinating eligible people actually makes a great impact in those children who cannot be vaccinated yet.
So, Mr. Quintana, so does that mean that in the safety and mitigation plan that the 3 foot is going to stay, or are we going to change that back to 6 feet?
At this point, we're proposing that it does stay at 3 feet. That is something that again, Dr. Moran can confirm that.
Yes, so
the CDC has mentioned that.
Yes, so the current iteration of CDC states that for elementary schools, 3 feet is safe, that you don't need to do 6 feet. And of course, tomorrow, like I said, CDC will publish the new guidelines for schools, and we'll see if they have a significant change on the distance. And there's plenty of research to support that 3 feet distance. So you wouldn't really be relaxing anything if you keep your distance at 3 feet. You would actually be following CDC guidelines for elementary schools.
And would you project that, Dr. Moran, that that's gonna be the same for when they release their update tomorrow? Are you able to?
Well, this is kind of like the crystal ball question, but I think they will, because like I said, the science, even before vaccination and before what we know right now, it shows that 3 feet is safe, particularly in children for elementary school. So I suspect or anticipate that they will keep the 3 feet as a safe distance.
Thank you.
I'd like to just remind the governing board, a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Victor Diaz had presented to the board our case rates that we have seen in COVID. And so we know that we've had people who have tested positive, but we also know that we did not have any transmission within any of our schools. And so that shows that our mitigation plan is working. And so the recommendations that we have here tonight are still mirroring that, with the exception of the masks. And that is something that Mr. Quintana will be talking about in the next part of the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and continue and talk about our classroom capacity and our spacing of our desks. And so we will continue in our classrooms to space our desks 3 feet apart in accordance with the CDC guidelines wherever possible. We will continue to have overflow classrooms for those classes who have a larger number of students. And then also we will still make available the partitions for teachers or students who would still like to use those partitions in their classrooms. In terms of playground equipment and recess, all of our playgrounds will be open. We will be offering students the opportunity to have recess, but we will continue to clean and disinfect the playground equipment per the mitigation plan. And that states right now that they will be cleaned at least once a day, and then sometimes twice a day, depending on the school and the number of staff available. And then, of course, during recess, we will certainly ask our students to follow the proper distancing guidelines while they're outside playing. So let's talk a little bit about the cleaning and disinfecting. So we will continue to clean and disinfect our classrooms just as we have throughout this last year. So they'll be cleaned at least once a day, and then sometimes twice a day where needed. In terms of the air quality and the ventilation at our schools, you might recall that we've improved the ventilation at all of our facilities. We've upgraded the HVAC filters. We've followed the recommended outside airflow with 25% minimum with our energy management system. And then also we've installed the needle point bipolar ionization systems at all of our sites. And I know Mr. Quintana wanted to talk a little bit more about this installation.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jeffries. I want to get the board up to date on our ionization systems that we're installing. The systems have all been installed at all the schools. And the next step in the process is that we also have an EMS, the energy management system, and also all our schools. So the next step in the process is that whoever has to go back and basically connect the two systems together. The EMS basically help us manage not just the temperatures in the rooms, but also the airflow. Make sure we have the proper airflow coming in out of the facilities, and also as we go through that connection process between the EMS and the new systems, the new ionization systems, we're going to be going through a process where the PDS staff, Chris Walford in Plant Services, David Yokohana, facilities coordinator, and our construction supervisor, Ross, is in working with Johnson Engineering, that's helping us also manage this project, and working with Pueblo. They're going to be going through each facility and going through a punch list and a checklist of each of the units to make sure they're fully connected, make sure they're properly working, in proper order. And also we did a pre-test of the air quality in 3 of the schools, And we're also going through a process where we're going to do a post-test, if you will, on the same schools, after it's all installed, to make sure that we're getting, the improvement in the air quality, in those units, before it's all said and done. So that's something that still needs to happen, and that will happen before school starts. Right now, it's scheduled to get all done by the end of the 28th of July. So that'll be all done, completed by the end of July. But also I wanted to recognize the folks in plant services, Chris Walford, David Yokohana, and Ross. I'm sorry, what's Ross' last name? I forget her last name, but anyway, everybody knows that as Ross, so I think she knows who I'm talking about. Anyway, I wanted to thank her for all the work. They worked really hard on this, working with Johnson Engineering and with Pueblo to install these systems, and we think that they're going to provide some great quality air into our facilities. If you recall, the ionization system, the description of those, it kills the bacteria and the virus prior to getting into the system. So that's that's a benefit. That's one of the benefits of this system. So we're very happy to have this installed, and also appreciate the approval of the board to be able to make this this major project happen.
Yes.
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
Carmen Trujillo here. It was on the slide prior to this. I would like to ask what an overflow classroom looks like. Is that a class split up, or is that moved to like a bigger room? I don't recall.
Yeah, it means basically another room. So what happens is, in most cases, with the 3-foot distance, well, depending on obviously the class of the size of the class, we can fit 15, 16 desks in the classroom, and we'll put additional desks in another classroom, typically adjacent to that classroom, but it is a separate classroom. And so they kind of coordinate with having the teacher and maybe an instructional assistant that helps coordinate the instruction between the two groups at the same time.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you very much.
And then looking at visitors and volunteers on our campuses, we will be restricting visitors to the front office only, just as we have been doing this last year. And then for volunteers, we will allow volunteers on campuses if they're providing an essential service to the educational operations of each of our schools. But for those people who do come on campus, we will certainly be asking them those health questions and making sure that they're also doing those health checks prior to coming on campus. So with that, I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Mr. Quintana.
Ms.
Yes.
Jeffries,
Yes.
Jessica Bueno, I have a question. I'm looking at on our board docs, I see a draft presentation. So what I didn't see on your presentation was addressing the special areas. So music, arts, PE, band, choir, and drama.
And Mr. Quintana is going to cover that in the next section.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Great job, appreciate that. So yeah, this section we will cover the special areas, and so part of that I did want to explain the difference between the draft that we put in board docs and what we have today, because this the basically kind of come up with the recommendations and and the new plan, if you will. It's been a kind of moving target with getting together with staff and with the schools and with the Healthy Verify. And so, almost every day we made additional changes to that until we got to the point today where we think we have a pretty good plan that we want to recommend to the board. So that's the reason why the draft changed a little bit from last week to this week. And we will obviously send you and put this current version in the in the minutes, so you have this this final version. And also, I wanted to remind the board again that there's a team of individuals that have been really working hard on this effort and this plan, and that's Sarah Sims, Chris Walford from Plant Services, Lynette Wilgen, Dr. Victor Diaz, and Ms. Linda Jeffries, and obviously along with all the other folks that are part of the safety plan and the safety committee and the principals. That it's too numerous to mention, but I want to make sure that to recognize them as well. And so in that effort of talking to all these individuals and we came up with, and also with Healthy Verified reviewing our recommendations and actually, to be honest with you, all the, also changing some of our recommendations because, after kind of going through the science and after going through the information that Healthy Verify has that we may not have, they were able to kind of convince us or make some changes to the plan that are going to be better and more safe for our students and families. And so we have basically 4 areas that we wanted to change in the current plan. And ultimately, we want to get your approval this evening, all those changes, and then figure out how we move forward. And one of the first things that, and first I want to say also, I want to thank you for the questions that have come up, prior to this. These are things that, we've been asking ourselves, we've been asking each other and Healthy Verify. And, it just, it's helpful to kind of, try to piece all that together. And so ultimately we can, together we can come up with the best plan possible. And so with that, getting into the face covering and vaccinations, as you may or may not know, there was a law passed that went through almost the last days of the budget process, actually at the legislature, where they passed this law here that I've indicated on the, on the form here, that basically prohibits us from making it mandatory for staff and for students to wear a mask. And so with that being said, then basically we cannot require families and individuals and staff or students to wear masks. However, it does not mean that we cannot emphasize it, that we cannot encourage it, highly encourage it, whatever term we want to use, and that is our goal, to keep encouraging the wearing of mask without requiring it, and hopefully we get the majority of the students and staff and families that will continue wearing them throughout the day. But we just basically as a public institution, we do have to follow the law, and we feel that's the best way for us to do that. And again, we're going to continue requiring other mitigation measures, including the 3-foot distance that we feel is appropriate and safe. And we also, the other question came up regarding the buses, because we want to continue to require mask wearing on the buses, primarily because there's going to be more kids on a bus. They're going to be closer together. And but also that we're pending kind of legal review and from legal counsel to make sure to let us know that we will not be prohibited from doing this, based on the new law. And that's something that they're reviewing now, but we would like to continue requiring the wearing a mask by the students on the buses. And so that'll continue unless our legal counsel saying that will break the law.
Are we still distancing on the buses? So we need more busing because we assume all of our students who bused in prior years will come back. And didn't we do alternate seats or have empty seats or something last year?
Yeah, so obviously we have to look at the capacity. So we might have to do additional runs, depending on either that particular route or the school. And so we still want to maintain the distance in the bus, at least 3 feet, if not more. So it may require additional bus routes. We have the capacity as far as the number of buses and the number of drivers, but it might impact the flow of school starting, right? As far as if we have to make a couple of runs in a couple of routes.
When do we expect parents then to have that information as far as their child bus route and time and whatnot?
I'll be honest with you, I need to defer to, do we know, when do we typically know that?
We typically send out bus information a few weeks ahead of time before school. And so we would plug this information into our normal communication for families. But Dr. Vink, you bring up a really good point with a lot of the questions that you've been asking, and that is, why are we here, right? we're here to provide this information to the governing board so that we can go back and provide clarity to our community. And so as soon as we get get this conversation out of the way, get clarity, have a good summary of exactly what the governing board is voting on, we'll begin to provide that information to our families and our community and to our staff so that we can adjust the necessary capacity and all the rest. The other thing that I would add is over the last couple of months, HR has been working to add 80 additional staff members to our community using ESSER funds. And so hopefully a lot of that staff will be hired and we'll be able to use that staff for the benefit of safety for our community. We also live in a community that's very safety conscious. So communicating, asking the community to participate with us, explaining the why we're here part, I think will go a long way in getting the kind of cooperation that we'll see in our community that may not be statewide.
I agree. The additional staff is in addition to the extra staff we had on hand last year in order to, I think we were trying to have 2 adults per classroom or whatnot. So that's in addition to all of the staff we had last year.
I'm sure my numbers aren't dialed in exactly, but the short answer is yes. It's additional staff for interventions and for instructional assistants and things like that Mr. Quintana alluded to that we would hopefully be able to use to help with some after school or some additional cohorting or overflow classes during the day, those types of things. The principals and the staff on the campus are going to be key to this entire, these pillars that the board would be setting down for the district.
That's a good point. My concern is our principals, or they elected a safety manager. Is that how they determined that last year? How are we ensuring that all of those safety managers are making consistent decisions at all of our schools then?
Yeah, so that, thanks for the question. The group that I'm talking about that we're getting together right now, like once a week, that is our group. It's a group of safety managers for each of the schools and along with the principals. We're getting them involved because obviously they need to know what the decisions are and how we're going to implement this plan, between now and the start of school. So they are being fully communicated with, and after this evening, we will schedule another meeting next week with the same group and talk to them about, these decisions that were made today and how we're going to implement them, and also how do we make sure that, because basically that's their job, to make sure that the staff in the schools are following these protocols. And that's basically the work that they have to do on a regular basis. So, and also discussion we'll have, and we will probably get together with them, if not once a week, probably once every 2 weeks to make sure that these things are implemented properly.
Dr. Vink, I would just add that school districts in general have a culture of safety, and Phoenix Elementary is a school district that has a culture of high safety. So when you have an organization this size, you got a lot of hierarchy, you got a lot of bureaucracy, you get a lot of that. All of that clears the way. Safety trumps everything, and that's because our customer are children. So that's part of the culture of the district. That's been part of the culture of our planning and execution all along. And that's how we intend to move into the new year. Safety is a top priority.
Any other questions or comments about this particular item on face coverings? So the next item is covers field trips. As you recall, last year and during the school year, we basically prohibited, and stopped all the field trips. And we feel that right now, with as long as both our schools and the locations where field trips are being taken to, as long as they're following proper protocols, that we can reconvene the field trips. We do have a couple of caveats here that we want to make sure that that schools understand, is that this would only be for local field trips. no out of town or no overnight trips, that would be approved. But also to make sure that, we check with the location or the place that they're going to the field trip, that they have very solid mitigation and safety plans and that they're being followed before we make these trips. So that's something that, we want to propose that we basically reconvene field trips, for local field trips. And then in the after-school programs, which primarily are going to be peer sports programs, but also other extracurricular activities that are also very important for all our students. We want to reconvene those. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that is something that has been expressed to us that families they want that those activities. They want whether it's a peer program or sports programs. They want those programs back. And so we want to implement them in as safe a way as possible. And we know that the not cohorting, is probably going to cause a little bit of a concern there. But we do feel that by following other guidelines, again, not so much requirement, but the enforcing and trying to encourage mask wearing. That'll continue throughout the whole day, throughout these activities, but also to make sure that as much as possible, the individuals are staying separated, from each other and, have that at least a 3-foot distance between them. And then on special areas, similar request. We at this during the last year, we were doing special areas and programming virtually, and for the same reasons, we feel that we can do this safely with encouragement of mask wearing and also the distancing. And in particular, the ones that we have more of a concern with is the music programs, the choir, and things or programs that you may be singing or putting out your breath and or using an instrument that you have to blow into the instrument. Those are things that we want to show and take into account. And we feel that by even in those programs, that if we can use those programs in bigger areas like the cafeteria or the gyms, that we can separate the kids, far enough from each other that they can do this safely. And then when the weather gets better, then we can also do that outside as well. And so that's something that we want to reconvene, and get your approval on. Any question on any of these 3 items? Yes, Mr. Yu.
Thank you. Carmen Trujillo here. I might have missed this, but as far as the special areas are concerned, I thought that was on another slide saying there were no changes to that. So can you maybe talk about the difference between the 2 slides?
Yes. That's one of the areas that prior to speaking with Healthy Verify, we felt that that it would not be safe to continue to do these programs, especially again the music and choir. Those are ones that we had kind of more particular debates about. And so the schools and the administrators and principals, they want to bring these programs back. But when we first sent out our recommendations, we didn't feel we could do it safely. But after talking to Healthy Verify and indicating that if we follow these certain guidelines on the distancing, using bigger areas, that when we have to, to provide more safety, we basically moved that from the kind of the existing protocols to the recommended protocols to reconvene those programs.
Okay, so just so I can understand it. So does one knock out the other one? So we don't want, sorry, I didn't prepare this question. I just know I knew I read it on the other slide. So is one, are we replacing the other slide with this more updated?
Yes.
Request?
Yeah. This is basically the new recommendations, the updated recommendations.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Do all of our schools have space to provide those programs in larger areas?
Most of them do. But also it's something that, that we're not going to force on them. Because we also want them to coordinate between, obviously administration and the teachers, and so that if they can determine that this can be done safely, then they'll reconvene that way. But if, for example, if the teacher doesn't feel that this can be done safely, then we're not going to force them, to do that. But we also want to give the option to some of the teachers and schools that that can do this safely to allow them to do this. So, I mean, to your question is that if there's a school, for example, that has limited space, or yeah, they may not be able to, to do that. So in that case, that particular school, may not be able to do, either, music or choir to that, to the full extent.
Could they provide their programs virtually to their students?
Oh, yeah, that'll continue. Yeah, so that, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't clarify that, but yeah, that'll continue. So whether we do this virtually or in person, these programs will continue. It's just a matter of, can we provide these in person safely? And if we can, then we'll do it in person.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Quintana, Carmen Trujillo here again. So just, it'll be probably at the teacher's discretion as far as that flexibility on, like, I guess what the class environment allows.
Yeah, I would say it'll be the teacher and the principal.
Okay.
Kind of, their, kind of combined discretion, if you will. It'll be a decision that they can make. And then, at that point also, they can also connect with the safety manager of that school, to make sure that, that if they can do it safely, and get, getting input from them as well.
Great. Will we be updated on that like later on as far as which schools are doing what?
We can, yeah, we can do that.
Just to know what's going on as far as how our schools are being innovative,
Mhm. Yeah, we
Thank you.
can definitely do that.
So I also wanted to share in our conversations with Healthy Verify in terms of our special areas, and also hearing from our teachers. Our teachers are requesting, for the most part, for many of these areas to return to in-person instruction because it is very difficult to teach the special areas virtually. And so some of the recommendations that Healthy Verify gave us the other day for us to look at and consider is, especially for the band program and the wind instruments. So we might consider moving the band class to a gymnasium or to a multi-purpose room, so a larger setting where we could allow greater space, a 6-foot distance between those students, because again, the concern is either the singing or the playing of the instrument, wind instruments. So certainly we want that distance to be more than 3 feet, and smaller class sizes. Certainly for PE, when the weather is nice, certainly they can have greater flexibility to go outside and conduct their PE classes. So there's a lot of variations that our special area teachers and our principals can look at in terms of space availability and maybe moving those classes outdoors when the weather permits.
Any other questions?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So, what we're asking for, after the, obviously this discussion is, we're asking for the approval of the board to approve these items here, which, kind of summarized, on the last couple of pages. No mask and vaccination requirements, although, I'll I mentioned the other caveats. Reconvening of after-school programs, in-person instruction in special areas, and reconvening of field trips. That is something that we like the board to consider and approve for changes on the mitigation plan.
I have just a couple other questions. Did the team consider how many students Well, actually, first, can you remind me what would require a student that was within the 6 feet for 15 minutes to then be quarantined? I think there was something about testing. They could get tested and then come back or something. How long are students quarantined and what are the requirements for that?
So there's a couple of things. One is if they're showing symptoms and we ask them to get tested, if they come back positive, they have to stay at home or away from school for 10 days. Unless they come back with a negative test after 3 days. Now, one thing that we talked about today is that tomorrow there's going to be some new guidelines put out by the CDC. They may or may not change some of that, but as it stands now, it is 10 days.
Okay, so the students that were around that student then can also have to get a negative test within 3 days, or they're out for 10 days? Is that?
If they're showing symptoms, so if they're exposed and
Thank you.
thank you, Lynette.
Hi, Governing Board. I'm Lynette Wilchin. I'm the Health and Wellness Coordinator. So if you have symptoms or test positive, you're out 10 days. If you are around a person that tests positive or has symptoms, you're out 14. You don't get to come back early.
Okay, so that is my question then. So how many students typically, maybe last year, if you had a student that was positive and the other students around them, how many students ended up being quarantined for one positive student?
Last year, we were super safe and we were doing the classroom.
Okay, so the whole classroom was
We
quarantined.
did not
14 days.
have to.
Okay,
We could do the 6 feet,
right.
but we were super safe.
Okay, so I love super safe, but even if
So
you were
do I.
just doing the 6 feet, has your team done any math on how many students might end up quarantined if you were just doing 6 feet, Mr. Quintana? No, okay.
We've not done the math yet. but,
Okay, so I did really quick estimate just because we have the classroom, we have small group, we have cafeteria, we have after school peer, and then maybe you have like an after school club or something. So now all of those.
It's
just the
going to be,
6 feet
it's going to be
contacts?
more.
Right, so if we have, say, even 2,000 students that end up out for 14 days, how are we going to educate them
Well,
through the whole year, for the whole year?
one thing is our numbers are lower than last year, so
Okay.
we should have fewer.
But we have more students in the class than we did last year, right?
Yes,
Okay,
but we have more adults that have gotten the vaccine.
okay,
The cases that we had in students last year came from their families. We did not have transmission of staff to student or student to staff.
right. But our families,
I don't know their rate of vaccinations, but they're better than last year,
okay,
right?
yes,
We've had a lot of events in the community. We had the event with our districts, with our 3 schools. Tomorrow is another event. I have gotten in contact with a friend at the county health department. So we're going to try to do some vaccination throughout the year. Our vaccination rates are low with all the vaccines, as it is in the whole county. So we're going to try to tackle not only COVID, but everything. And then with our partnership with Wesley that we're going to do, they're going to be able to do all vaccines, not only for students and staff, but we want to branch into the community. So we've got some good things that we're going to be implementing to increase that as we move along.
thank you. And I appreciate that. I'm just still worried that we have now students that, because when we sent them home last year, they were online then, they were learning online.
I am
So
so
this
worried
year,
also.
We're not. So I'm just wondering, what are our options? And what is our plan for that? And is it in the overall?
I will promise you, I am a person that sees a problem and finds a solution. I saw the problem of immunizations. I'm finding some solutions. We will work to figure this out.
I appreciate that.
Will we have an answer by the beginning of August? We'll have something. But yeah, it's really hard. COVID is really hard.
I'm so glad that you
I'm
I'm
honest.
out. Thank you. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
we're gonna find a way to educate these kids. We're not gonna not educate them. If it's pencil and paper the first week, but we're gonna figure it out. You have all of our words. We're gonna figure it out. But I don't go to the education meetings. So I don't have an answer for that. Maybe Deborah does.
Dr. Vink, members of the board, we are exploring possible scenarios to support students who are potentially quarantined due to exposure or due to their own catching of COVID. So we're working with our iAcademy. We're also working on designing seamless systems so that if students are out for extended periods of time, we can quickly enroll them in our iAcademy program so that they can take courses virtually and then get back to their home schools as soon as they're well. And we're also looking at the possibility of designing asynchronous lessons using our iAcademy teachers so that they can receive the information that they need, work at their own pace, but then still have access to our iAcademy teachers. And then another possibility that we're exploring is the possibility of having hybrid types of classes where students are being taught by their teacher virtually while they are quarantined.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Yeah, other questions?
I've got one, Mr. Quintana, Carmen Trujillo here. So the PDF document on board docs is different than this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the older one, it does say that we are figuring out distance learning options. So I appreciate that part, but is it possible to get this one also sent to us? That way we've got it, because from what we're not voting on the one that's on board docs, we'll be voting on the one we just covered and is being recommended. So just to clarify that this document takes care of the one that's on board docs.
Yeah, this one supersedes that one, and again, I apologize for that too, because we had some changes, things that happened over the last few days, just trying to clarify some things with Healthy Verify and the rest of the team. And so we can come up with what we felt were the best solutions and best recommendations. So, excuse me, that's the reason they don't match, but this one here basically supersedes, that one. But also to your point about the instruction, especially when kids are in quarantine, that is something that, even though it's not on this one, like Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, we're looking at ways that we can continue providing that, that education to the students.
Thank you for clarifying, because that was my concern, like, if they now have, things that aren't included on this one that were on the old one, that was my concern, being
Right.
able to differentiate, so.
And what we can do as well is, in addition to making sure that this new version is in the minutes, I will also email you this version, so you have that as well.
Thank you.
Jessica Bueno, is this your last slide?
Yes.
Okay, so then I do have a question, because based off of the last presentation, we do talk about just friendly reminders and just, signage. And so I just want to be very clear that, this is very much a hygiene issue. So if we can just be really adamant about, reminding our kids to wash our hands, cover our mouths, keep your hands to yourself. If that can just be like instilled in our kids, I think it'll really help with spreading the virus if anybody has it. So if we can just really work on that and have signage all over the school, in the school, communications, just reminding families that they have a responsibility at home. So I would really like to just reiterate that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that, because as you saw the rest of the presentation, it does include information regarding signage and so forth. And so first of all, yeah, that will continue. I think it's also probably a matter for us to also not just, remind people, but also with the start of the new year is to remind our staff that, hey, we have these, these signage protocols that we want to follow. If something happened during the summer that, kind of changed the signage at your school, let's make sure we put this back in place. And that's something also plant services can also assist with. So we'll make sure and do that.
In line with Ms. Bueno's question, last year, I think it was Whittier who had a video about how, and I had asked about other schools doing that. I am concerned that we have students who have not been on campus since we shut down. And these procedures, although hopefully they've been doing them in the community, may be new to them. So I would love to see some marketing communication go out prior to like now, yesterday, a month ago, and what that's going to look like for our students and for our new kindergartners, right, who've never been on campus.
Yes. Well, thank you for the reminder as well. And that's also part of the reason why Ms. Lindsay Jeffries is part of this committee, because the communicating with the families is the utmost important. So we want to make sure that we communicate with them properly and timely. And that's why the kind of conclusion, if you will, of this, the latest plan will be helpful, so we can begin communicating that information out to the families next week. And we will look at also that the video, see if that's something we can also include.
And Jessica Bueno, I think it would be a really good time to resurrect our newsletter and get it out to the community. I haven't received one in 18 months, so I think it'd be a good time to do that.
If we could see the word strongly encouraged for masks, that would be great too. And just to the community as soon as possible, so that parents who maybe really weren't planning on sending their children with masks can decide whether they want to enroll them in the I Academy or how they want to proceed with that as well.
Yeah, well, definitely the first of all, the encouragement, is going to be there, strongly and so forth. And but also, with some incentives, for them to wear the mask as well. That's something that we want to institute. But also, I'm sorry, back to your point as well, Ms. Bueno, is that I know Ms. Jeffries has a newsletter, ready to go, and that should be going out shortly. And to be honest, I kind of held her up because we want to provide information regarding the M&O override in the newsletter. So there's some information that I need to get to Mrs. Jeffries before she can, print that and send it out. But I know that's something that she has in mind to do that very shortly.
Yes, please. And if I can clarify, when I meant newsletter, I meant the physical mailing to, the whole district, because I know we do one digital too, but we've also done a physical one.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Otherwise, wanted to again remind you of the recommendation to approve the plan.
Madam Chair, I have a comment. I'm looking at the clarity. This last slide here provides clarity to the governing board on exactly what the board will be voting on tonight. And that way we can begin to disseminate the information to our communities. The first bullet, no mask and vaccination requirements, is recommended by the administration. I think it's a small detail, but how you vote matters. I think bullet number 1 really is an acknowledgement that a law was instituted requiring or mitigating the board's ability to enforce masks. I don't know that the board would want to vote in a way that made it appear as though the board was supporting this, unless it is the pleasure of the board to support the legislature. If it's not, I would either strike that first bullet entirely because it is a matter of law, or to rephrase to capture into the minutes that although the board does not agree with the legislature's mandate for this, it does in fact acknowledge that the law exists. So you might think it's a small thing, but as your voting record moves forward, I think that paying attention to a detail like that might become important. So you might want to have just a little bit of conversation about that amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's important that when we do vote on this, that and I'm sure the community is well aware of the legislature and what's been happening at the legislature, which is what Dr. Quintana just explained to us, is that as a board, we don't have that power anymore to mandate masks. And so as we vote on this, I do want the community to know that that control has been taken out of our hands. And I agree in terms of either passing this or not is having that stipulation that you just said, and I would support that going forward.
I also agree. I'd like the first line to say masks and vaccinations strongly encouraged. And maybe a note to the law, I don't care, but or remove it. It doesn't, but definitely something that we don't want to look like, or that I don't want to look like I'm agreeing with the state.
I think you could add, so what Dr. Vink said, masks and vaccinations strongly recommended, but not required pursuant to ARS, whatever the law is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
And sorry, that was Dr. Diaz speaking.
So then, Ms. Jeffries, how this is articulated from the board would go into our materials to the community. The position of the board relative to the legislatures and budgetary stuff. So if the board has a specific articulation, is it following Dr. Diaz's statement regarding pursuant to ARS, masks and vaccinations strongly recommended, however, not required due to ARS, whatever it is, or SB, whatever it is, right?
This is Dr. Diaz. Does anyone have opposition to the way I worded it? Thank you.
I don't have opposition to changing that. I do, Alicia Vink, sorry, I'm working on stating my name. I am still just a little concerned about changes because it seemed to me that, again, Healthy Verify was suggesting we go full forward with mitigation. And so I'm still a little confused, I guess, as to why we're walking back things as we're adding students. I understand the need for after-school programs. I get it. And I understand the need for our students to be in the classroom. I just am trying to reconcile what I heard Dr. Moran say, and then also kind of backing up this mitigation.
Dr. Vink, I want to first applaud the team for coming together to make recommendations on almost an insurmountable task, right? And our lawmakers have compounded it and made it worse. So first of all, Mr. Quintana, members of the team, if you're listening, Lynette, I want to thank you all for the hard work. I want to thank Dr. Moran, Mr. Hill, everybody, just the incredible amount of folks have been putting time and effort into this, and you, governing board, for asking smart questions and realizing that I'm going to call it tension, revolves around our mission of teaching and learning and our mission of supporting our families and our communities, where health is the pillar that stands in the middle of all of this. As we get back to a traditional in-person environment, I think I would suggest that although these things feel like rollback, they're strategies that have handled well and monitored well. I think it can be a very impactful balance between safety and teaching and learning, and I hope the board sees it that way.
Dr. Weeks, this is also, I would say, not a living document, but it's a document that's up to review. Or no, because I know the CDC guidelines are going to be updated tomorrow. But as we adopt this, we're still going to review this in another period of time. Is that correct?
You know, there's a couple of things the board can do, right? So, Mr. Trujillo, to your point, we posted a PowerPoint to board docs, and 2 days later, you're looking at a different PowerPoint, right? Tomorrow, the CDC is going to hand out some new guidelines. This thing is moving very, very fast, and tonight is an example of that. One of the things the board could do is ask us to look into the possibility of delegating that authority to the administration to be able to make changes as necessary. The changes that I anticipate would happen would be to be more restrictive, not less restrictive, as we move forward into the fall and into the winter. That way, we wouldn't necessarily need to ask the board for special sessions. We wouldn't need to ask the board to come together every time there's a change to the plan. And I only make this suggestion because of the kind of the rapid pace. I think things are going to be moving as we move into the start of the school year, into the fall and into the winter. And then, of course, it's the obligation of all of us to make sure that we stay on the same page.
Sorry, that was Reggie Carrillo. I keep forgetting to say my name too. Yeah, I think that's a discussion for another time. The strong point for me here is that, yes, it's up to review, and that in terms of Dr. Moran's data and the research she talked about, is that it does strongly show that the 3 feet or 6 feet is not that it's irrelevant, but that I think she said that those distances, the 3 feet, is still backed up by science, by the research that's been done. I just want to add that in there.
So, Madam Chair, are you ready to call for the vote?
Yes. So can I please have a motion to approve item F2?
Reggie Carrillo, motion.
Do I have a second?
Sorry, what I motion to pass with the following changes that we had talked about, or is that fine how you said it?
Yes.
As discussed, Mr. Carrillo.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Jessica Bueno, second.
Are there any additional questions or discussion? Thank you all for the work that you've put into this. I know that this has taken a lot of time and effort and will continue to take a lot of time and effort as we all navigate through this. So with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed say nay.
Nay. Madam Chair, may I explain my vote?
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge all of the work that's been done here, and I greatly appreciate that. And I know that our district as a whole is working to ensure the safety of our students. I am going to vote nay just because I am worried about walking anything back, and that is what I feel like we're doing, but I know that we are committed to safety. I'm going to.
Thank you, Dr. Vink. With that, the motion passes, and we will move on to item H1.
Thank you, Governing Board. And also I want to thank Mr. Eric Hill and Dr. Moran for joining us this evening. Thank you very much.
Are there any board reports or requests?
Mr. Carrillo, did you want to talk about the site visits that you made?
Yeah, I was able to go with Dr. Weeks on site visits. What was it, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, and then a week before that. So I went 1 week and another week. And for me, that was my first time stepping on the campuses because, again, because of the impact of COVID and schools being closed. Me being a teacher, I just didn't have time till the summer. And for me, it was awesome because not the fact that there wasn't a lot of students on there, but I was able to see the maintenances and the facilities. I know we're passing the M&O override too. And so for me to go there and see the strong assets of each campus's personality really hit home. As you say, leadership is not in your seat, but on your feet. And so that's something that really rings true when you go to the campus and you see that what we're voting on is also there's more has a more visceral impact when you're actually on the campuses. And I know a lot of you who have already done the site visits know it makes it more visceral, it makes it more personal. And I want to thank all the principals at the sites that I was able to tour for really showing their passion to their school, showing their commitment to their students and to their communities, and showing me around to all these beautiful campuses. And each campus I went to, I fell in love with each campus. And I really hope that we're building a culture of collaboration. I know we are, and continuing that to double down on that, because each principal I've encountered is very passionate in what they're doing and the community that they're working for. And I just would love for them to share their information on what's happening to their campus. Emerson, Faith North, Bethune, they all have something unique. And I feel like they should be sharing that with each other. And I'm excited to see more campuses going in the future and to see what the process looks like when kids are actually on campus too.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Yes, and we don't want to forget Hurd, but it was a wonderful tour, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you. And with, of course, it's always a pleasure to spend time on campuses and with principals and staff. So good. And does anybody else have any board reports? Any sites? Maybe.
I have a request for the Pathways to Success. Dr. Quintana, is just, I know that we're doing the RFP process. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I would like to request a board report on that process. What are the steps? I know you've told me before, but I'm more of a reader and writer, and that's how I absorb information better. So just having that board update so I can read it and memorize it and understand it better would help me. So if you could send that my way, I would appreciate it.
Yes, I will provide a board report the next week on that.
Thank you. Are there any additional board reports or requests? Hearing none, we'll move on to item H2. I am not really sure how to facilitate this.
So, Madam Chair, administration recommends the governing board approve the nomination and election of the governing board vice president for 2021. And to put this into context, if I recall, this is your last meeting before the end of the year. And the idea would be that Mr. Trujillo would move into the from the vice president to the presidency, right, as per policy. And then to secure a vice president to work with Mr. Trujillo from now to the end of the year. And so this action item may feel a little clunky because we already have a vice president, but at the end of the day, we don't expect your return before, we don't know when you're coming back.
Yeah, and if there's any community members still listening, I'm 4 weeks away from giving birth. I mean, who knows? So that is why this is my last meeting.
So perhaps we could change the item to say pro temp vice president, should you return before the end of your term, right? Maybe pro temp vice president. So administration recommends the governing board approve the nomination and election of the governing board pro temp vice president for the duration of the 2021 calendar year.
Mhm.
Maybe that's a better item.
Mhm.
And then what you would do, Madam Chair, is just open it up for nominations.
All right. Well, do we have any nominations for the pro temp vice president?
Reggie Carrillo, I nominate Jessica Bueno.
Any others? Ms. Bueno, do you accept this nomination?
Jessica Bueno here. Yes, I do.
Wonderful. So would we vote on that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to elect Ms. Jessica Bueno as the pro temp vice president for the remainder of the 2021 year?
Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
And do I have a second?
I second. Reggie Carrillo, I second.
Is there any additional discussion or questions?
Just wanted to make a comment. I'm glad you put this in here and got this taken care of, so I appreciate that. And congratulations on the nomination.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Bueno. All right, and we'll move on to item H3. Can I make a motion to table this item, Dr. Weeks?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Well, am I allowed to do that since I'm the president? Can I have a motion to table item H3?
Alicia being so moved.
And do I have a second?
Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
And is there any discussion? I'm not exactly sure how this would go, but I would like to table it and bring this topic back once I come back from maternity leave. So perhaps I want to say maybe December. Is that something that we would vote on now, or is that something we would, you and Ms. Trujillo would discuss as you're doing agenda setting?
Madam Chair, the governing board is not required to set a date for
Okay.
tabling. It's if it's the pleasure of the board to table any item, it can do so and just table it
Okay.
until some future date.
Okay.
May I ask a question for procedure?
Yeah.
This is a new motion. Or do I? Okay, so there's one that's already in here, so do I add a new motion? Do I add a new motion because there's one already here to approve the contract?
So motion to table.
So we didn't call for a motion to approve the contract. We just called for a motion to table.
That's correct. The administrative recommendation was not read aloud.
I see. Okay. So are we good on that? Are there any additional comments or questions? And just a comment, the reason for tabling, just for the community, I think as a fairly new board, we just want to, we appreciate and value Dr. Weeks. This is nothing personal. We just want to have time to collectively understand the district's goals and really be intentional with evaluation processes and, you know, being that we are all fairly new, we're not necessarily all on the same page, and we need time to really discuss what that looks like. So I appreciate Dr. Weeks' patience as we work through this as a board. Okay, so all those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. With that, the motion passes, and we'll move on to item H4. Are there any future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we will adjourn the meeting at 8:10 p.m. Thank you all for your time tonight.